It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Welcome to the Bad News Broadcast. I never wanted this job. Over 2 decades of my life now, nonstop. I can't look the other way. My conscience won't allow it. Controller chaos, carnage, and collapse. First, weather wars. This week in North America, chemically nucleated snow in southern New Mexico with rain falling in northeastern Canada, not far from the Arctic Circle. Yeah, that makes sense. Parts of Texas were pushing 90 degrees, while a dusting of chemical snow was reported in southern New Mexico. Search and review the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org if you want the facts on winter weather warfare that's being waged constantly, which can and often does include baseball and softball size hail, along with all sorts of other shapes and sizes of frozen material, the chemical kind. Don't eat the snow or the hail, and I don't say that in jest. Record-shattering chemical-laden snow in Alaska, the kind that sinks boats in the harbor, there was so much of it, with new warnings of snow-melting midwinter rain coming for the far north. Record warmth throughout eastern North America, the far north. Short-lived chemical cooldowns in other parts of the country are yet again rebounding to record warmth and rain. I'll get to the bad news breaking headlines shortly, lots of them. But first, some big picture ranting. It needs to be said, and all of it is absolutely inseparable from what is taking place in our skies. Resource wars. Venezuela was only the latest from a very long and growing list of countries whose resources were confiscated. I'll get to that list shortly. Doesn't mean Maduro was a great guy. Nobody's saying that. But might doesn't make right. And the list of countries that the U.S. military has invaded and or occupied over the last 100 years is about 100. Over the last 200 years is close to 200. Ponder that. Mexico, Colombia, and Greenland have now been named as the next targets for empire resource acquisition. And again, I always have to state that criticism, just criticism of what our country is doing in our name, is not condoning what any other country is doing. That kind of dichotomous thinking is a result of power structure programming, the you're either with us or you're with the terrorist nonsense, a mantra that's been so radically pushed on populations of this country. On the same subject from Euronews.com, Trump aide Miller says no one would fight U.S. over future of Greenland. Really, Mr. Miller? Might makes right, and you're so sure about your statement? Looks like you're completely clueless, Mr. Miller. From BBC, European allies back Denmark over Trump's threat to annex Greenland. 6 European allies have rallied to support Denmark following renewed insistence by the U.S. that it must have control over Greenland. Greenland belongs to its people, the report states. The peace president that so coveted the Nobel Peace Prize he didn't get. I wonder why not. Here's a point to ponder. Which country is considered the greatest threat to global peace? Let's ask AI. Here it is. Quote, global surveys often show historically the United States has frequently been named the greatest threat to world peace in polls. Really? I wonder why. Could it be the 800 U.S. military bases that are scattered all over the world in everyone else's country, on their border or in their backyard? That's called empire. Could it also be that the U.S. military is by far the largest participant in global geoengineering operations, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare in our skies? The U.S. military, with a jet tanker fleet that's 3 times bigger than all other militaries in the world combined. Reminder report, historical record. Even as far back as 1977, the U.S. military had already conducted no less than 239 open-air biological tests on innocent and unknowing Americans. Please don't believe me. Please investigate for yourself. And I recognize there are good men and women in the U.S. military. I'm simply asking them to wake up and stop participating with the insanity. Many will cling to their denial of what's taking place in our skies by telling themselves that if weather warfare on this scale was taking place, there would be whistleblowers lining up everywhere. Really? How many from the mainstream medical industrial complex are lining up to blow the whistle on the fact that so-called safe and effective concoctions are anything but safe and effective? Who is the only person to go to jail over the illegal U.S. torture program. Yeah, the whistleblower, John Carrico. We all now live under the rule of state-sponsored mafia. It's truly perplexing. All the pretend patriots blindly waving their flags in full, unquestioning support of the very power structures that are filling our skies with climate engineering filth, nonstop, spraying all of us like insects. This core of complete out-of-control power most certainly includes the mini-me Middle Eastern country that's undeniably the tail wagging the dog in this equation. And there is this new very alarming headline to ponder from numerous major sources. Trump says his powers are only limited by, quote, my own morality, end quote, and that he, quote, doesn't need international law, end quote. The report then states the president raised the possibility of invoking the Insurrection Act domestically to utilize the U.S. military inside the United States. The message? If you step out of line, or even if you don't toe the line, you'll soon pay the price. We could ask Charlie Kirk about that if he was still here. Charlie wasn't lucky enough to just have his ear nicked, or at least have it look that way. So Charlie wasn't able to have security stand him up just in time for the photo op, just in time for the fist pump in front of the waving flag in the background, just in time for the election. And who showed up in Mar-a-Lago a week later to celebrate the photo op? Bibi. If all that doesn't scare the hell out of you, it should. From AP News, Trump proposes massive increase in 2027 defense spending to $1.5 trillion, citing, quote, dangerous times. Question, would the new, even more massive military be for controlling Americans, as well as countries that aren't okay with being told their resources are actually our resources? Is all this part of, quote, making America great again? Reminder, in 2012, U.S. agencies like so-called Homeland Security purchased over 2 billion hollow point bullets, billion with a B. Who do you imagine they're planning for? Is this plan B or C if plan A and B doesn't work out? In the 2010 census, every single American's doorstep was GPSed. The GPSers hiked almost a mile behind my closed gate in the forest, not once, but twice, to make sure they GPSed my doorstep. Twice. There's more. Let's add this from Yahoo.com. Vice President Vance says that the federal agent involved in the fatal shooting in Minnesota has, quote, absolute immunity. Really, Mr. Vance? Federal agents have absolute immunity? Does that include the U.S. military if they're deployed in the U.S.? The controllers always try to divide and polarize by framing increasing crimes and atrocities as left-right issues. Please see through the smoke and mirrors. We're all rapidly running out of time. There's us and there's them. We must stand peacefully against the insanity, or we will play right into their hand. The controllers are all part of the proverbial big club, in the words of comedian George Carlin. And as he also stated, we aren't in it. Yes, there are a few courageous exceptions in government for which I am so very grateful, and they know who they are. Again, to those that refuse to get over their programming of you're either a conservative or a Democrat, either the right or the left, either red or blue, please wake up. Yes, Biden was brutally bad, like so many before him, but the current cast of comic book characters has radically reset the bar to a whole new level of insanity and self-annihilation. Does anyone that's even slightly awake actually believe that these Matrix puppet actors in the White House are actually going to do anything but radically increase the toxic weather warfare spraying in our skies? Exactly what has already been taking place? The money printers behind the curtain control it all, with few exceptions: government, military, and media. Global ecological unraveling from every direction. The controllers are acutely aware that collapse is imminent, ecological and societal, factors which are inseparable. Thus, the increasingly blatant and belligerent behavior of controller minions, more building of bombs and bunkers. They are getting ready as fast as they can. Biosphere collapse is the bottom line that will very soon make all other causes and concerns moot points. Loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute policies until nothing is left. Literally. I hope and pray that our military brothers and sisters dig deep to consider the oath they took to protect Americans from all threats, foreign and domestic. Tyranny can only triumph by the active or passive support of willfully blind order followers. The Milgram experiments were a stunning example of this. As the proverb goes, we have seen the enemy, and he is us. Arizona Senator and decorated war veteran Mark Kelly is bearing the brunt of White House blowback for simply reminding our military brothers and sisters of their oath to protect Americans. Mark Kelly is a rare and courageous soul in today's circus of insanity and moral bankruptcy. Mr. Kelly deserves our full support. And for all the morally bankrupt matrix-serving minions that fanatically push the "it's just jet exhaust in our skies" narrative of nonsense, with each passing day, your attempt to deceive will be further exposed. Again, this week in North America, domestic crackdowns and control, the Gestapo SS, the proverbial brown shirts, the tightening of the noose, the stated reasons for the militarization is a smokescreen. They are putting their chess pieces in place in preparation for total lockdown. Collapse is close. The fueling of fear, anger, and outrage in the population certainly serves the agendas and objectives of the controllers for many reasons. For the controllers of the Matrix, the more widespread the chaos, confusion, and distraction, the better. All of it disappears. Problematic news cycles, the Epstein debacle is only one example of many. Many links in the chain of our current completely unsustainable reality are already far past breaking points. Those that roll their eyes and walk away from any such conclusion will very soon have their heads ripped from the sand. Wait and see. Where's the tidal wave of justifiable outrage from the population? Why are so many completely comatose at the wheel while the powers that shouldn't be continue to corral us all for the final culling, spraying us like insects from the skies and countless other forms of human health breakdown? With all the chaos and carnage from every conceivable direction, Earth's collapsing life support systems are completely off the radar. Exactly what the money printing power brokers want, to keep the majority of populations completely distracted, divided, and polarized till the last possible moment, so that they don't even see, let alone comprehend, unfolding total collapse of everything everywhere all at once. How can we cope with the coming collapse? Stay tuned. I'll do my best to address that challenge. Again, how many Americans are blindly waving their flags with no apparent sense of responsibility for what's being done in their name, so long as they believe that such hostilities will somehow keep their personal paradigm and personal pursuits of pleasure going just a bit longer? Sports, Disney World vacations, Caribbean cruises, while much of the world's populations are simply trying to survive another day on the orbiting asylum, and we are taking resources from countries all over the world to support the, quote, American dream. Those resources are being taken by force. It has always been the case. Back to climate engineering, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare from BBC. Refreezing the Arctic, brightening the clouds so they reflect the sun's rays, the crazy but serious geoengineering ideas that could save our planet. How's that going so far? How long will this matrix deception continue? How long will the population buy it? What's been ongoing for 80 years and has pushed us completely off the edge of the abyss. We are circling the drain now, and they're still pretending we could, may, might do it someday. From bluedot.com. Will geoengineering save us? Question mark. Again, how's that working out so far? From esquire.com. A more correct headline: we're committing climate suicide. Yes, we are. It's not just climate suicide. It's total planetary omnicide. Climate engineering at the top of the list of destructive human behaviors. Very long list. Too many people ignoring the rest of the list. That's wrong. That's not credible. It's all the above. Every human action that destroys the planet's life support systems, that disrupts the former energy equilibrium of this planet, is a part of the problem. Climate engineering, top of the list, but the list is extremely long. And we're not even considering nuclear everything, which will end it all overnight. From the Council on Strategic Risks.org, for the record, this report is a mirror of U.S. policy and behavior. Here's the headline: Putin, permafrost, and propaganda. Russian information manipulation, a changing climate. And back to the Arctic or the polar regions, why are they so important? Because those are the air conditioners of the planet. If we lose those, game over, and we're losing them by the day. And the equation is as non-linear as it could be. It's unimaginably exponential. We don't have much time. From this report, again, Putin, permafrost, and propaganda. Russian climate-related information manipulation types and examples. It's a study undermining climate science. This is an exact mirror of what our country is doing right now. Russia is a central case study on the intersection between climate change, information manipulation, extremism, and geopolitics. Russia's efforts to protect its hydrocarbon-intensive political economy and to suppress domestic dissent. Yes, the USSR and the USSA. Same game plan. Total disinformation campaigns to feed the propensity of populations to completely deny extremely near-term looming existential threats from countless directions, doubling down on denial till the moment of impact. What's a typical response from far too many when their denial of what we are all about to collectively face is challenged? Let's ask AI again. Is AI correct on this? Yes. AI overview. Challenging the denial of an existential threat often creates anger because anger can serve as a psychological defense mechanism against fear and powerlessness associated with overwhelming threats. When individuals are forced to confront a reality they have been suppressing, the resulting shock and vulnerability can manifest as anger, which feels more powerful to them than the underlying fear. Anger as a defense. Anger is an emotion intertwined with the fight or flight response, providing an illusion of control in the face of perceived threats. For many, anger feels more manageable than the passive, helpless feelings associated with existential dread or terror. Existential threats can shatter a person's sense of meaning, purpose, and security. Challenging their denial of this threat is often interpreted as an attack on their constructed reality and stability, leading them to fight back emotionally. And for those that are willing to face and share dire truths, there is this: the fear of being ridiculed. People who express concerns about existential risks sometimes most of the time face ridicule or are labeled as, quote, alarmist, which makes them hesitant to share their fears and can contribute to feelings of anger or resentment. Yes, exactly. The anger and resentment that comes from being surrounded by whole societies that absolutely don't want to even know the truth, let alone having any motivation whatsoever to investigate and face unwanted truths. And for those that do dare to tell the truth, regardless of the repercussions, stand strong. You are the salt in the festering wound of the collective insanity. You are on the narrow road, and you deserve to feel a sense of solace that can never be taken by anyone, ever. Moving on, more bad news from the UK Guardian. Winter blooming of hundreds of plants in UK. Visible sign of climate breakdown. It's an abrupt climate collapse. We would be lucky to face climate change. That's simply a term coined by the controllers in 1998, which was the warmest year ever recorded up to that time. They knew they were going to be doubling down on climate engineering using lots and lots of chemical ice nucleation operations, which causes massive weather and temperature swings. So they needed a term that would try to make people believe that that was all part of the changing climate as well without climate engineering. So they coined the term climate change. That's where that came from. It's an abrupt climate collapse, far worse than anything that we've been officially told. From BBC, planting crops in 2026 may be pointless. That's the headline. That doesn't sound good, does it? Food shelves emptying out soon. Wait and see. Another from The Guardian. These trees may not survive. Jordan's ancient olive harvest wilts under record-breaking heat. Extreme heat and drought has destroyed 70% of Jordan's olive crop. Let's not forget the complete collapse of pollinators. Bee populations down about 95%. Officially, 70% collapse this year alone, last year and this year. But that's 70% collapse of the 20% that remained. Pollinators are almost done. What then? About the olive trees, they say the endangered livelihoods of 80,000 families and centuries-old tradition is collapsing. Imagine that. From sfgate.com, despite California rains, America's largest reservoir remains in peril. It's been raining buckets, the report says, in California. Much more to that story. Always sensationalizing that. Not true. Only true in some places that they show the most of on media. But one of the state's largest suppliers of drinking water in neighboring Nevada was a troubling low level yet again at the end of 2025. They're talking about Lake Mead. There's also Lake Powell. The report says currently the water storage situation for the Colorado River system is not good. And these two reservoirs are at about 30%. 30%. They're nearing dead pool. On that note, from progress.com, farmers face devastating water cuts as Colorado River disappears. From that report, Western growers brace for mandatory reductions as Lake Powell nears catastrophic failure point. 7 states must agree on cuts by February deadline. 7 states with straws in the Colorado River are at the table to stop a disastrous reservoir decline in Lakes Mead and Powell, just stated that, which are at 30% of capacity because of chronic overuse. Climate engineering is the single biggest factor here. The climate engineers control the spigot, how much it rains, where it rains, how toxic that rain will be. Totally ignored, completely ignored, because the people who pin these reports are protecting their paychecks and pensions. Cowards. Our societies are filled with cowards that refuse to face the truth. They'll have no choice soon. Report then states water levels have fallen critically at both major Colorado River system reservoirs. Lake Powell is approaching critical elevations where water will no longer be able to flow through the Glen Canyon Dam, making this more than just a legal or political issue, but one of human health and safety. The Glen Canyon Dam has other ports about 100 feet below the primary ports, but available data states that these outlets are not stable and could lead to catastrophic dam failure. And even if they do work, that's draining the last drops out of the lake, just like Lake Mead has a drain plug in the middle, an astoundingly expensive engineering project so Las Vegas could drain the last drops out of Lake Mead. That's the mentality of the human race. Party until the brutal, bitter end. It's kicking the front door in now. More reports on the chemical snow and jet stream manipulation. A little more detail here from the Washington Post. Record snowfall in Alaska is sinking boats and crushing roofs. I already mentioned that earlier. From the Weather Channel, Juneau running out of room to dump record snow as it races to dig out before rain arrives. That kind of weather whiplash swing that is worsening weather cataclysms all over the world. And now for Alaska, perhaps record rain on top of record snow. Very bad combination. On that note, from AccuWeather, new Pineapple Express to aim heavy rain at Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. The report says the weather pattern is lining up to deliver another round of heavy rain that may escalate into significant flooding. Let's take a moment to remember the U.S. military document Owning the Weather 2025. And certainly they are there. It's more of a climate disruption scenario now, because the planet's life support systems are completely breaking down, and the power structures and the militaries they control only know how to double down on their insanity. But climate engineering has been and continues to be the crown jewel weapon of the military-industrial complex, the weapon with which they can, are, and will continue to bring populations to their knees without those populations ever even knowing they were under assault. And for those that continue to try to claim, again, just jet exhaust in our skies, cloud seeding doesn't work, mountains and mountains of data to completely refute all of that. In fact, the U.S. military, again, fact of record, so successful at controlling the flow of precipitation all the way back in the 60s with Project Popeye, that international communities passed INMOD treaties, environmental modification treaties in the 70s, which prohibited weather warfare, but not the use of manipulation operations over a country's own population. And not that any countries pay attention to international treaties anyway, do they? They're all being thrown to the wind at this point, and they weren't followed in the first place. And about the shifting patterns of precipitation, the climate engineers are absolutely desperate to mask the polar meltdown, even if they have to kill the entire planet to do it. And then they again, pretend it's some natural shift. On that note, from phys.org, North Pacific winter storm tracks shifting poleward much faster than predicted. How many headlines, how many weeks, over how many years? Recently, most especially, we have headlines that it's way worse than we thought. It's happening far faster than we thought, and that's exactly what I've stated on the record for 20 years. It's way worse than anything we're being told, and now so many sources are being forced to admit that, not because they suddenly are invested in telling the truth, because they can no longer hide it. In the controller quest to mask the polar meltdowns, they have ensured that on the current course, no one gets out alive. They have destroyed the planet's remaining life support systems, all but destroyed. Some semblance remains. It's up to us to protect and preserve that, or none of us will escape what's coming. They have used northern latitude and southern latitude forests, the incineration of those forests, as a form of climate engineering to put enough particulate matter into the skies to provide temporary toxic cooling at the cost of destroying the ozone layer, and again, decimating what's yet left of the world's forests. The toxic rain kills soil microbiome. That kills root systems. Trees are dying from the bottom up and the top down. The beetles come in and take over. None of the official agencies admitting to that. Search the engineering wildfires section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Again, the source of ignition, separate subject completely. What is setting the template for these forests to burn with such ferocity? It's a form of climate engineering. It's being used as a form of climate engineering. Not saying there's no other causes, but I'm saying this is a primary cause that's not being admitted to. Search wildfires serve geoengineering agenda. That's one of our most important short video reports. The climate engineers are currently cooling the U.S. in a manner that includes directing moisture into the western U.S., breaking that moisture up into the widest possible coverage area, and chemically nucleating that moisture to create some very meaningless flurries of frozen material here and there. And that process, the endothermic reacting process from the chemical ice nucleating elements, these are patented processes. Again, search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. The chemical nucleation process dries up much or most of the moisture in the process. So you have very meaningless flurries again here and there, not much moisture. Soil stays far drier than it should. And even when there is a buildup of this chemically nucleated frozen material, much of it tends to sublimate, so there's not nearly as much runoff as there would have been and should have been if it was a naturally nucleated snow, disrupting the entire climate hydrological cycle. Back to the report from phys.org. Alaska's glaciers are melting at an accelerating pace, losing roughly 60 billion tons of ice each year. About 4,000 kilometers to the south in California and Nevada, records for heat and dryness are being shattered, which creates the template for the wildfire events I just mentioned. And they're not talking about this exact week in time. They're talking about overall, this is the trend, period. They continue. Major factors contributing to the climate change in both regions is the northward shift of winter storm tracks. This is jet stream manipulation. Frequency transmission facilities like HARP are core to this equation. They are altering atmospheric everything at this point. It's a free-for-all of insanity in our skies. And yes, they do have this power, and yes, they are doing it to themselves. Again, Project Starfish Prime, Project Fishbowl, just two examples. Detonation of hydrogen bombs in the magnetosphere, which our government thought could collapse the entire atmosphere. They did it anyway. Imagine that. The storms that are being moved north, manipulated north, transport heat and moisture from Earth's warmer regions toward the poles. When their tracks shift northward, more heat and moisture reach Alaska, the giant snowstorm that just sunk the boats and now the rain following after it, while natural ventilation of the southwestern United States is reduced, driving temperatures upward, aka the 90 degrees in Texas that is occurring right now. There's nothing natural about any of this. Nothing. The report then states, quote, studies point to a troubling pattern. You think? And they end with this. Models fail to capture the effect of climate change on the recent northward shift of storm tracks. What they fail to capture and would never admit is the climate engineering elephant in this equation. And all of this manipulation further fuels the weather and temperature whiplash scenarios that are worsening by the day in this country and around the world. On that note, from AccuWeather, spring-like warmth in east to be erased by return of cold air, snowstorm potential. The report then says unseasonable warmth will linger across the eastern U.S. into the weekend before colder air pushes back in waves. Again, anytime there's enough moisture, they chemically nucleate that, creates a cold insulator of air that sinks to the surface. They can create various forms of frozen material. Often, if the temperatures are too warm, the chemically nucleated moisture hits the surface before setting up, so you have ice storms everywhere. There's always an ice storm transition zone between flows of warmer moisture, especially out of the record warm Gulf of Mexico or the Great Lakes. And as these processes continue, they cool the air mass down enough and other forms of frozen material fall. But in the beginning stages, you can have this chemically nucleated moisture hit the surface in liquid form, and then it sets up, aka ice storm, now the norm. At my mountaintop, fully off-grid home in the wilderness of Northern California, it's the middle of January and not a single below freezing night yet. Not even close. Carbon fuels and climate engineering. Two of the nails in our collective coffins. In addition to the too high temperatures, there's the toxic rain and extreme UV radiation. Also, both direct consequences of climate engineering operations. Almost all the formerly thriving fir trees on my mountain are dead. The ones that remain are not far behind. The Douglas fir is the predominant tree in western North American forests. All are in sharp decline. Many are already dead, gray ghosts, speckling the formerly deep green mountains, ridges, and canyons. My heart bleeds for my silent, sentient brothers, the trees. I walk among them, and I weep. No trees, no people. Simple, no web of life. For those that want to more deeply grasp the inconceivable miraculousness of trees and all flora, the following two book titles are essential reading: The Secret Life of Trees and The Light Eaters. What you learn will completely alter your understanding of what far too many take for granted. Forward into the storm. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 544, January 10th, 2026. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, known as geoengineering. Global Alert News aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country, all commercial free. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on an email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam file. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Best way to share: circulate the direct link by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still are not looking up, which is mind-blowing. You could set the sky on fire, and many people would notice. We need to change that fast. Start the conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal is to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words, and we pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We also have Geoengineering Watch hoodies and shirts, photos on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to start up a conversation on the climate engineering issue, reaching a critical mass. Only way forward in this fight. We must wake the masses. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. We must awaken our military brothers and sisters, their families, families of defense industry personnel. We need all of them to stand down and stop participating in our common demise. And keep in mind that our military personnel are being told falsely that they're participating in something good, something benevolent, something that's saving the planet instead of killing it. We need to wake them up to the fact that they're being lied to. Nothing new. compartmentalize and utilize military brothers and sisters as pawns in the power structure chess game. That's what's happening. And as always, to those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering insanity, and you know who you are, you have my deepest gratitude, always, forever. Moving on, more weather warfare extremes. From AccuWeather, a Paris snowman at the Eiffel Tower. This is exactly what they like to sensationalize while other parts of the world are burning to the ground, literally. I'll get to that in a moment. Several inches of snow fell in Paris, allowing for a small snowman to be built in the front of the Eiffel Tower, and they sensationalized the hell out of that, just as they do here. The snows pile up in Erie, Pennsylvania, and Buffalo, New York, and they sensationalize that. You could literally walk a few blocks and be out of the snow completely. Please, people need to wake up, look around. Nothing's right. On the other side of the world, in the land down under, Australia, yet another scenario of firestorms and floods. First, the firestorms from ABC Australia. Victoria braces for catastrophic fire conditions. And they compared this to the January 6th fires in Southern California from last year. Is it just a coincidence, all this timing? Is any of this timing ever just a coincidence? And the numbers like 9/11 on 9/11, meaning emergency to most people? The report says, Victorians have been told to expect catastrophic fire conditions. That's exactly what they told LA right before it happened, isn't it? Exactly. With extreme heat, fierce winds, and lightning strikes expected in the region, scheduled. That's the term that should be used in this report. And next, here's the comparison from the UK Guardian. Outskirts of Australian cities at risk of catastrophic fires on a scale of deadly LA blazes. Study finds at least 6.9 million residents in Australia are exposed. And the floods from dairynews.com, all happening at the same time in Australia. Australian livestock disaster. Queensland floods kill thousands of cattle as rain returns. Queensland flooding kills tens of thousands of cattle. More rain and a possible cyclone threaten further livestock. It's so heart-wrenching to see photos and films of these cows trying to find somewhere to stop swimming and to stand up before they drowned. It's sickening. None of this is natural. Nothing can be considered natural at this point. The entire system is completely and totally disrupted and getting worse by the day. And about the scheduled weather script readers, the scripts change now radically. In a single day, the next 2 weeks worth of script can completely change because the scheduled weather is in a constant state of flux. And the script readers keep pretending that they're forecasting, they're reading scripts. And for anyone new to this broadcast and doesn't understand that or hasn't heard me explain it before, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin do all the weather modeling for the National Weather Service and NOAA, the nation's weathermen. Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, private defense contractors, neck deep in climate engineering, everything. So we have the foxes running the hen house. We have illegal federal gag orders on the nation's weathermen, National Weather Service, and NOAA. The system is rigged top to bottom. Next, from CNN and other sources, Trump administration begins slashing FEMA disaster response staff as 2026 begins. The Trump administration abruptly cutting disaster response and recovery staff at Federal Emergency Management Agency. The report then states the notices stunned employees who learned they would be let go within days. Weather warfare, with no one to respond to the disaster, makes for a population that can't really do anything else but try to survive another day at some point. How often do we hear, it's the economy, stupid, as if that's the only thing that matters in the world, even if the world is dead? No, it's the environment, stupid. And when the environment crashes, and it is, the economy must follow. On that note, from numerous sources, breaking U.S. federal debt is up to a record $38.5 trillion, yet we're trying to boost the military by 50%. That's what we need, more bombs, big bombs, to blow things up. From MSN, mom and pop business bankruptcies hit record as debts rise. From the UK Daily Mail, a frightening recession indicator is flashing red, and Americans can see it all over Main Street. Yes, you can. You can certainly see it in Northern California and Redding. There's lots and lots of empty stores, more all the time. So again, let's consider this with all that going on. Epoch Times and other sources, Trump proposes increasing military spending by 66%, up to $1.5 trillion. I wonder how many atmospheric tanker aircraft, the geoengineering spray jets, that extra money will buy. From AMU TV, World in 2025, recapping last year, marked by wars, political tensions, and climate warnings. The year 2025 was dominated by continuing wars, rising political tensions, and mounting warnings over climate change. It's actually abrupt climate collapse, with diplomatic efforts struggling to contain crises that show little sign of resolution. They're not going to be resolved. The dominoes are collapsing and accelerating all over the world. About the oil thing, let's put something into perspective. I don't want to miss this note because we've heard the administration pretend that they don't need the oil in Venezuela. That's just a rumor. We have so much oil here, don't we? Yeah, from fracking, which is permanently destroying what groundwater we have left. So how much oil does the U.S. have, really, in comparison to Venezuela? Venezuela has about 10 times more oil, according to all official statistics. Venezuela having nearly 20% of the planet's remaining confirmed oil reserves, and the U.S. having about 2%. Let's ask AI another question about U.S. military interventions and what they were for. AI says, the U.S. has a long history of military interventions, invasions, and covert actions with significant examples in the last 200 years, including often involving direct military force or CIA-backed efforts to alter governments or achieve strategic goals, aka procuring resources. How dare those Venezuelans and other countries have our oil buried underneath their countries? And sadly, that's the mentality of far too many Americans. So again, was AI correct in this case? And though I don't condone AI anything, the historical truth is even worse. As I stated earlier, about 100 countries invaded, occupied, or destabilized in the last 100 years, approximately another 100 foreign wars and interventions in the previous 125 plus years. How is that not empire? Let's add this from INETeconomics.org. Trillions for war, pennies for people. How soaring military spending fails Americans. From the report, President Trump proposes to spend that money, again, boosting the military by 66%, while millions of Americans can't cough up the funds to see a doctor. The report then says, what we've built is a self-feeding racket of corruption, misaligned incentives, and grift that courts catastrophic wars overseas while eroding democracy at home. Exactly. With all that in mind, let's expound on the war is a racket part. This is an excerpt called War is a Racket from a speech delivered in 1933. Nothing has changed. The speech was by Major General Smedley Butler of the U.S. Marine Corps. Here it is. War is just a racket. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it's about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the masses. U.S. Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler continues with this. I believe in adequate defense at the coastline and nothing else. If a nation comes over here to fight, then we'll fight. The trouble with America is that when the dollar only earns 6% over here and then it gets restless and goes overseas to get 100%, then the flag follows the dollar and the soldiers follow the flag. Blindly, I would add. The U.S. Marine Corps Major General then says, I wouldn't go to war again, as I have done, to protect some lousy investment of the bankers. There are only two things we should fight for, he says. One is the defense of our homes, and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. He then says, there isn't a trick in the racketeering bag that the military gang is blind to. It has its fingermen to point out enemies, its muscle men to destroy enemies, its brain men to plan war preparations, and a, quote, big boss, super nationalistic capitalism. Butler then states, it may seem odd for me, a military man, to adopt such a comparison. Truthfulness compels me to do so. He says, I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of this country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks, from a second lieutenant to major general. And during that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. Nothing has changed. Nothing. Butler then says, in short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. The Major General then states, I suspected I was just a part of a racket at the time. Now I'm sure of it. Like all the members of the military profession, I never had a thought of my own, until I left the service. My mental faculties remained in suspended animation while I obeyed the orders of higher-ups. This is typical, Butler says, with everyone in the military service. He then states, I helped make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. He says, I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1909 through 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. In China, I helped to see to it that the Standard Oil Company went its way unmolested. During those years, Butler says, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back on it, I feel that I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. That testimony, again from U.S. Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, was from 93 years ago. The only thing that has changed is that it's now exponentially worse. And all the while, life on Earth is circling the drain, and this includes us. Why is almost every self-proclaimed spiritual institution and almost every pastor of the same completely silent in regard to the atrocities that are being carried out in this country and countless other countries all over the world? Why are congregations not holding their pastors accountable? When you attempt to share dire, unwelcomed, and unwanted truths, expect to be demonized, ostracized, marginalized, and ridiculed, even by many that you thought you knew. Collapse isn't just coming. It's already kicking in the front door. From collapsechronicle.com, the break between awareness and acceptance. There's a moment in collapse awareness that people rarely describe with clarity. It's not the moment you learn the facts. It comes later. Most collapse-aware people begin with information that spans across disciplines, the arithmetic of ecological overshoot, the fall in energy return on energy invested, the fragility of global life support systems, and the steady erosion of economic and social cohesion. None of this is complicated when you see the pattern. It's uncomfortable, but it's clear. From our climate engineering jet-sprayed, filth-filled skies to the cancerous cabal of completely out-of-control criminals that are currently running the planetary asylum, aka the money printers, ultimately. Extremely near-term planetary omnicide is looming large on the horizon. There's many more headlines of unfolding biosphere collapse I wish I had time to cover. I'll do my best to get to all of them in next week's broadcast. The issue of how to deal with collapse needs addressing. Awareness is the cognitive realization that industrial civilization is entering contraction and demise. Acceptance is the psychological recognition that the worldview you lived inside no longer holds. The first step is information. The second, transformation. The distinction matters because collapse is not only material and ecological, it's existential. When the worldview dissolves, the collapse stops being abstract. It becomes personal. The story that shaped your identity loses coherence. What feels like the world cracking is often the loss of architecture that keeps your existential fear at a distance. You begin to live with a sense that something has ended, even if you can't yet name what it is. This is the beginning of collapse acceptance. It begins with the death of a story and the loss of inner self-programming that has been shaped by that story. Modern, industrialized, militarized so-called civilization is built on a cultural story that shapes almost everything. It assumes that, quote, progress is normal, that perpetual growth on a finite planet with finite resources is natural, and that the future will be larger and more comfortable than the past. This story lives in education, economics, media, family life, and even personal identity. It becomes so familiar that most people never even recognize it as a story, as programming from the powers that shouldn't be. What is all too often missed is that such a worldview performs a psychological function. It protects the mental state of individuals who harbor it from the awareness of their own mortality. As I've made mention of in previous broadcasts, terror management theory describes how many cultural worldviews buffer existential fear by creating shared systems of meaning, continuity, and purpose. These systems place people inside a symbolic order that makes life feel coherent. They offer a sense of belonging with a story that extends beyond individual experience. The perpetual growth and progress narrative has performed this role effortlessly. It has softened the presence of mortality. It told you that your life was part of a project that would continue beyond you. It allowed you to imagine a future that felt safe and open. It made finitude bearable by embedding you inside an upward movement of so-called civilization that would outlast you. Collapse awareness tears through that protection. The story fails, and the self that lived inside it begins to lose its anchor. This is why early collapse grief feels so disorienting. You assume you're grieving the living world, and you are, but there's something more subtle underneath. You're grieving the worldview that once held your life together. You're grieving the meaning structure that protected you from the fear of your own mortality. You're grieving the self that lived inside that structure. The death of a worldview is rarely dramatic. It happens slowly, then all at once. You begin noticing that certain assumptions no longer feel true. Optimism feels performative. Conversations built on continuity sound ridiculous. The future loses shape. Events in the world strike you differently. You sense fragility in systems that were once strong. You see the inexorable dissipation of energy. You see entropy everywhere. You don't choose to abandon the worldview. It simply stops describing the world and the reality that you're living in. The rupture creates disorientation. You begin to feel misaligned with people around you, not emotionally, but existentially. You no longer inhabit the expectations that organize their lives. You withdraw from certain conversations. You stop being able to project yourself into imagined futures. The goals that once motivated you lose their charge. The self you carried through adulthood begins to disappear. This is the beginning of a form of psychological death. Not despair, not collapse, but a shedding of sorts. People sometimes describe collapse acceptance as if it is a movement toward clarity or maturity. You begin noticing the effects in your relationships. The divergence is subtle at first, but undeniable. People you love still inhabit the continuity story. They can perhaps understand the facts you share, but not feel the worldview dissolving. They still rely on assumptions, on programming that you can no longer maintain. You've changed, and the change is not reversible. This is the threshold. This is where acceptance begins, not with clarity, but with a sense of loss. Collapse grief is often misunderstood as environmental despair or anxiety about the future. It does contain those elements, but collapse grief reaches deeper. Again, it begins with the world inside. Meaning becomes unstable at first. Not the idea of meaning, but the lived structure of it that connects your inner life with the external world. Meaning is the implicit framework that helps you understand where you are in time, what matters, what doesn't, how to make decisions, and what to expect from life. When the world view collapses, that framework wobbles. The world feels slightly off axis. Even when nothing around you has visibly changed, you feel unanchored within your own life. This grief is not easily named. It can rise long before you understand why you feel it. Your identity may feel like it's fading because it was tied to assumptions that have dissolved. You stop relating to goals and values that were shaped inside the progress narrative. You recognize that the person you once were was sustained by a worldview that has ended. To reach the point of acceptance, you have to be prepared to do the work. You have to want to live honestly, no matter what the cost. You're becoming someone new, and you can't be who you were. You're changing while the world around you remains the same. There's another layer that terror management theory clarifies. Mortality awareness drives consumption. When people feel existentially threatened, they seek symbolic safety through material acquisition, identity reinforcement, and participation in their culture's dominant norms. Industrial civilization has magnified this dynamic. In many ways, the economy itself has become a mechanism for suppressing existential fear. Material consumption not only uses resources, it manages anxiety in a way. Growth doesn't only produce goods, it produces a form of psychological stability. This means that overshoot is not only ecological, it's also psychological. A civilization built on death denial will always seek more material everything because it uses growth to regulate emotional life. Collapse acceptance breaks this cycle. It exposes the underlying fear. It reveals the mechanism. It shows how a global crisis emerged from an unmanaged existential reflex. Acceptance does not remove the fear, it removes the illusion that the fear can be solved through a false belief in perpetual growth and endless consumption. A culture built on the illusion of perpetual growth can't understand decline. A culture built on the illusion of perpetual growth can't understand limits. A culture built on death denial can't understand contracting futures. This is why collapse acceptance feels unspeakable. You begin to see the world through a lens that the culture can't acknowledge. Though the hour is late and the horizon is dark indeed, our collective futures are not yet carved in stone. Fully exposing and halting the climate engineering assault in our skies is the most important first leap we can collectively make in the right direction. We are rapidly running out of time. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please make your voice heard, make every single day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.